Hi everybody, Cori here. So I'm here today to film a video that we haven't filmed in I think a couple years, and that is a book haul. This is my personal July book haul because I went a little crazy in July. Where I live, thrift stores opened back up, so I was allowed to go to many a thrift store, and I indulged a little as it has been a long time and I love my thrift stores. I also bought quite a few new books. I don't buy this many new books typically, but like I said, July was a very long month, and apparently I hurt my bank account a little bit. But without further ado, I have almost 50 books. So I'm not going to talk in depth about them. I've read some of them, a bunch of them I haven't read yet, but I'm just going to mention them quite quickly because I don't want this video to be an hour long. So I'm just going to grab and go, no particular order. Yeah, let's get into it. So first up, I have Half-Blood Blues by Edugyan. This is the same author who wrote Washington Black, which is a book I read last month and really enjoyed. She is a Black Canadian writer, and I think this is historical fiction. Again, don't know too much about it, but I really enjoyed the other book by her I read, so I'm excited to give this one a go as well. And this one has won a bunch of prizes, so excited for this. Next up, I have Flight Volume 1 and 2 but edited by Kazu Kibuishi, who does the Amulet graphic novels. I've read the first volume a couple years ago. These are basically anthologies of different comic creators making stories about flight. I really enjoyed this one. It was beautiful, and I'm excited to dive into this one too. There's just such stunning graphic novels. Next up, I have Look Both Ways by Jason Reynolds. This is a tale told in 10 blocks. This is a book that I have already read. I listened to the audiobook and it was incredible, and it just has these 10 different perspectives. It's a middle grade novel, fantastic. Do pick it up. I love everything Jason Reynolds does. And then we have The Answer Is by Alex Trebek. If you didn't know this about me, I have been a lifelong lover of Jeopardy and Alex Trebek, and this is his new memoir that he just put out that I'm going to be buddy reading with a friend of mine. When I heard about Alex Trebek's cancer diagnosis, I actually cried, so I'm nervous to read this because I think it's going to be very emotional. But it just says on the back, I believe in the will to live, I believe in the power of positivity, I believe in optimism, and I believe in hope. So this is definitely going to be an emotional one for me. Next up, I have a highly acclaimed novel, and that is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Vuong. This is a book that I have heard nothing but incredible things about, and I haven't read it yet. But the first sentence of the synopsis is, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is a letter from a son to a mother who cannot read. And that just sounds so heartbreaking and emotional, and again, this is one that I've heard so much praise for, and I was so lucky to be able to find this beautiful edition at my local thrift store. Next up, I have Boy Snow Bird by Helen Oyeyemi. I read Mr. Fox by this author a couple of years ago, and I didn't love that book, but I have been so interested in picking up more from this author. Again, this is a book that I've seen around a lot. I don't actually know if people really love this book or not, and I don't know what it's about. I believe it might be a retelling of something, but I'm not sure what. But it is one I've had on my radar, so when I found it, I picked it up. Next up, I have Outrun the Moon by Stacy Lee. I've read a couple other Stacy Lee novels and really liked them. I think if you are looking for some historical fiction is not a genre that I typically reach for, but when I do reach for it, I tend to enjoy it, and Stacy Lee is one of the reasons for that. This one is set in San Francisco in 1906. Don't know anything more than that, but I'm excited to read it. Next up is kind of an indulgence, and that is the paperback of City of Ghosts by Victor Schwab. I kind of have a collection of Victor Schwab books, so when I found this one, I just picked it up for my collection. Next up, I have Heroes of the Valley by Jonathan Straub. Now, Jonathan Straub wrote the Bartimaeus trilogy, which is a really fun kind of lower YA trilogy that I totally recommend, but I think this one might be a standalone, but it has a Viking setting, and I am definitely intrigued by this. I liked the Bartimaeus trilogy enough to pick this one up. I'd never heard heard of it before, but when I saw it was written by Jonathan Straub, I definitely wanted to add it to my collection. Next up I have Pretty Baby by Mary Kubica. I like to have a couple mystery thrillers just sitting in my TBR when I'm in the mood for them. I've read another Mary Kubica before and I enjoyed it enough, so this is another one that I'm willing to give a go. Again, for mystery thrillers, I don't read the synopsis, so I don't know anything about this. So, and that's the way we're going to keep it until I read it. Next up, we have a lovely middle grade novel, and that is The Search for Wondla by Toni DiTerlizzi. This is about a girl who, I believe for the first 12 years of her life, has never been outside and has never met another human until one day somebody destroys her little underground home and she's sent on some kind of adventure. I've heard it's great and it's cute and it's full of cute, like, illustrations, and I think this is a middle grade I've been meaning to get to for a long time. Next up I have Robin by Dave Itzkoff. This is a biography about Robin Williams. The Dead Poets Society is one of my all-time favorite movies and means a lot to me. When I heard that Robin Williams had passed away, it was another moment in my life where it was like the middle of my work day in my old office job, and I just kind of had to stop and, you know, have a bit of a moment with myself. So again, another one that I am keen to read, but I know it's going to be very emotional, so, but we're going to get to it. Next up I have this beautiful edition of Danny the Champion of the World by Roald Dahl. I had never heard of this Roald Dahl book, but I stumbled across this like beautiful kind of collector's edition with all the Quentin Blake illustrations. I've been kind of slowly making my way through Roald Dahl's books, so when I saw this, of course, I grabbed it off the shelf, and it's just this stunning edition, so I'm super excited to have it. Next up, I have yet another middle grade novel. Apparently I have a few middle grades going on. I love good middle grade. But that is The Mysterious Benedict Society and the Perilous Journey, which is the sequel to the first book. I really enjoyed the first book, so I'm excited to see where the adventure continues. Next, we have a book I found in a little free library, and that is Truth in Bright Water by Thomas King. I'm actually currently in the middle of this one. And this is the story of two Indigenous boys who live on a reservation on the Canadian-American border. And then one day this artist who used to live in town but fled and kind of found his fame in the city has come back to town. The story was slow to get started, but now that I'm into it, I'm really enjoying it. I read one of Thomas King's other books, The Back of the Turtle, last year and absolutely loved it, so I'm so excited to be reading more of his work. Next up is another book I've already read, and that is She Would Be King by Way Too More. This is about 3 different people and 3 different perspectives who all end up coming together, and it's beautiful, it's heartbreaking, it's also speculative in really cool and unusual ways that I haven't really experienced before. It was a very surprising novel. I haven't heard many people talk about it, but I know it has some acclaim, so another one I encourage you to pick up. Next up I have The Killing Moon and The Shadowed Sun by N.K. Jemisin. These are some of the few books by them that I still haven't read. This sounds super cool. It says, their duty is to harvest the magic of a sleeping mind and use it to heal and soothe and kill those judged corrupt. So it's kind of set in this place where peace is the only rule. I love everything I've read by N.K. Jemisin so much, so I think these aren't going to break that, but even just reading that one sentence, I was like, that sounds interesting, so I'm super excited to read these. Next up we have Crenshaw by Catherine Applegate. This is another middle grade book about a boy and his family who are kind of down on their luck, and he has an imaginary friend named Crenshaw, who is this giant cat. He's large, he's outspoken, and he's imaginary. He has come back into Jackson's life to help him, but is an imaginary friend enough to save his family from losing everything. I think Catherine Applegate, I can expect to have some warm fuzzies, but to also be heartbroken at the end, but I am excited, and I love a good cat sidekick. Next up we have A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. As a book I've already read. I really enjoyed it. This one you have a lot more perspectives in it. The first book you mostly had April May's perspective, and this one you get to kind of follow her crew after the ending of the last one, which you know, I can't say much because spoilers, but I really enjoyed this conclusion to this story. I hope Hank Green writes more in the future because this was thoroughly enjoyable and I would definitely read more. Next up is a book that I am just about to start, and that is Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. So this is a book that I am just about to start and I'm very excited for. I think it's going to be a really important one for anyone to read. I've heard amazing things about it, and it's kind of about the feminist movement and what is wrong with the feminist movement, what it's missing, and just these blind spots that we all have in our lives. So I'm excited to read it because, you know, every day we gotta try to do better. So this is one I'm looking forward to reading very, very soon. Next, we have The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly by Soon-Mi Hwang. I have read this already and I absolutely loved it. It is billed as the Korean Charlotte's Web, and I totally get that reference. I don't think this is considered a children's book. It could be, I think, but it is about this laying hen who just wants to hatch a chick, and she's getting older and she's starting to not lay, and so the farmers decide to let go of her. Basically, they try to kill her, but she ends up surviving and ending up making her way back to the barnyard, befriending a duck, and finding an egg. And I'll just leave it there. It's beautiful and heartbreaking and lovely, and oh, I loved it. I loved it so much, definitely, and it's super short, so it's an easy one to pick up. Next up, we have another nonfiction, and that is You Are a Badass: How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life by Jen Sincero. I don't actually know if this is really good or not. I haven't looked up any reviews of it, but I mean, we can all empathize with not having the best confidence all the time. That's something I definitely struggle with, and just doubting the work I do, and just doubting myself, and I think we all do this. So I'm gonna look up some reviews before I read it, but this is one that I found for $1, so I picked it up and hopefully it'll be a good read. I'm back. Sorry, I had to take a break from filming, so if the lighting's different or I look a bit different, might have put on a different color lipstick, but I'm back to finish the video. The next book I have is The Lonely Hearts Hotel by Heather O'Neill. This is a historical fiction book set in Montreal and New York City between the two world wars, and it follows two orphans children who grow up together performing, I believe, and then are separated as teenagers and then come back together later in life. This is another Canadian novel that I've heard nothing but great things about. I might be participating in the Readathon, or the Canadian Readathon, that's happening in August, so this is potentially a pick for that, but I'm very excited about it. Next up, I have King and the Dragonflies by Kaysen Callender. This is another book I have already read. It is about a boy named King. It is a middle grade novel whose older brother recently passed away, so he's dealing with grief. But before his brother passed away, he told him that he shouldn't be friends with what is essentially his best friends because he's gay, because he doesn't, other people don't want him to think he's gay, does he? So it's King coming to grips with grief and the loss of this friendship and his internal prejudices and kind of coming to terms with who he is. It was a delightful book. I loved it. Obviously very heartbreaking in parts, but it also just eternally hopeful, and I just can't recommend it enough. Next up, I have The Girl Who Grew a Galaxy by Sherry Dimeline. I had actually never heard of this book. This one has been published by an indie press. If you didn't know, Sherry Dimeline is the author of The Marrow Thieves, which is an incredible novel that's very popular, at least in Canada. I'm not sure elsewhere, but it's so good. Highly recommend. But I was looking for one of Sherry Dimeline's other books, but I can't remember the title off the top of my head, at an indie bookstore online, and I noticed they had this one by Sherry in stock, so I just ordered it. It says Ruby Bloom has a lot going on. Her mother is eating herself to death, a soul-crushing museum job, and her flamboyant best friend who humiliates and saves her in equal doses. And then there's a galaxy of odd planets that spin around her head. I'm very excited for this. I'd never heard of it, but I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. Next up is one that I'm super excited to finally be hauling, and that is You Are Enough, Love Poems from the End of the World by Smoky Sumac. Smoky Sumac is actually a dear friend of mine, and he published this like over a year ago, and I'm only just getting my hands on it, which is like friendship fail. But my name is actually in the acknowledgements, which is just so powerful. Smoky is a member of the Jónasson Nation, and he's also a two-spirit Indigenous writer, and this is his poetry collection, and I'm super excited to finally be reading this and have it in my hands. I've known Smoky since we were wee children, and it's great to finally have this one. Next is an obvious one, Where Dreams Descend by Janella Angeles. Came in my owl crate. I finished this one recently, really liked it. Super fun, circusy Moulin Rouge vibes. Definitely give it a go if you haven't. Next up I have Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman. I loved Volume 1. This is the story of Nick and Charlie, two friends, and possibly more. I really, yeah, enjoyed Volume 1 so much. It's such a heartwarming comic. There's just something about sports graphic novels that I love. Next up is a book I had never heard of, but it sounds super interesting, and that is Visit Sunny Chernobyl and Other Adventures in the World's Most Polluted Places by Andrew Blackwell. And I believe this is just about Andrew Blackwell traveling to the world's most dangerous and polluted places, and I just think that sounds fascinating. So this is a non-fiction one that I'm definitely excited to read. Next up we have The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This is another book I have already read and enjoyed immensely. It's a story told in verse about a mixed-race gay teen living in London and his kind of finding his identity through the art of drag. It was fantastic. If you like stories told in verse, this is definitely one to pick up. Next up we have The Place of Broken Things by Linda D. Addison and Alessandro Manzetti. I picked this up because I'm doing the Book Riot Read Harder challenge this year, and one of the challenges was to read a horror book from an indie press. So I went online and was just kind of browsing around, and I kept seeing this one pop up. And it's horror poetry, which is not something I've ever thought of or even knew existed, but of course it does. I have read this. It was... I enjoyed the experience of it, but I don't know that I was ever... Like, when I hear the word horror, I assume I'm going to be scared, because I am a scaredy cat. Like, don't even come near me with a horror movie. I will not watch it. Like, I couldn't watch Supernatural, the TV show, because it's too scary. So some of the poems maybe were eerie and unsettling, but not frightening. To me, anyways. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. I'm glad I did it. It's definitely a book I would have never picked up had it not been for the Read Harder challenge, so I'm happy I did. Next up, we have The Rescuers by Marjorie Sharp. This is a weird version of The Rescuers. That's... The movie was based on a book, and this book is based on the movie, but not following the same plot. But it has characters that are the same. I think that's what's happening here. But either way, I did read this, and it was super fun. I mean, I wouldn't say go find it. I found this at a thrift store for like $1.25, so. But just a story about two little mice going on an adventure. It was a fun time. Next up, we have Candide by Voltaire. I did read this. I listened to the audiobook. I didn't like it. But it was a short classic, so I read it, but I didn't like this one. Next up, we have a chunky book, and that is The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub. So I am slowly, ever so slowly, reading Stephen King's books, but I will never buy them new, because I don't need to buy them new. They're in thrift stores. So when I find and when I haven't read in a thrift store, I typically pick it up. So this is another Stephen King. Don't know what it's about, but I'm gonna read it at some point. Next up we have The Lion Gang by Ruth Ware. I think I've read every single one of Ruth Ware's other books, and I haven't read this one yet, so I'm hit and miss with Ruth Ware. Some of them I really like, some of them I don't like at all, so I'm curious to see where I fall on this one, but it is kind of something satisfying about reading every book that an author has written. Next up we have Heartberries by Terese Marie Mailhot. This is a memoir by an Indigenous woman about her life growing up and coming of age on the Seabird Island Indian Reservation in British Columbia. think it's gonna be, I'd never heard, I actually found this at the grocery store, which is super random, and I saw it and I had never heard of it, but I kind of picked it up and skimmed over the back, and I'm super intrigued. And it's a memoir of pure poetry and courage and invention, which is blurb by Cheryl Strayed, actually, who wrote Wild. So I'm curious about this. I've been getting into reading a lot more Indigenous writings, so I'm excited for this one. Next up, we have this beautiful edition of Anna Karenina. If I've been saying it wrong the entire time, I feel like I recently heard somebody say Anna Karenina, and that makes more sense in my brain for Russian, but I don't know. Either way, I found this beautiful edition. I read War and Peace earlier this year. I did it. And I quite liked it. And I feel like I'm gonna like Anna Karenina even more. I definitely know a lot more people who've actually read this one over War and Peace. So it's still very long. Not as long as War and Peace, but it is, you know, a good solid 850 pages going on in here. So this is definitely one that I want to read. I will probably read later this year at some point. Next up, we have another Stephen King, Different Seasons, tiny paperback. I've already explained. I'm reading it. We're almost there, guys. I think we have like less than 10 left. We're getting there. Next up, we have Snowblind by Ragnar Jónasson. It's an Icelandic name. I picked this up because a friend of mine wanted to buddy read it. And it's an Icelandic thriller. And I didn't love it. I thought it was our main character, who is Ari. His name is Ari Thor, and he's always referred to as Ari Thor, which I thought was weird. But maybe that's an Icelandic thing that I just don't know about. But I didn't love our main protagonist, and I think you're supposed to really sympathize with him, and I just didn't. So sadly, this was a dud of a buddy read, but at least we both agreed on it. Next up, we have another Stephen King, and I actually read this one in July. This is a book I'd never heard of called The Eyes of the Dragon, and it is a high fantasy book about a little boy who discovers he can spy on his father through the eyes of a dragon on the wall. And it was fine. It was fine, but it was definitely nothing special. But it was okay. I enjoyed it enough, and I'll keep it in the collection. Next up, we have Artemis by Any Weir. Any Weir wrote The Martian. I loved The Martian when I read it several years ago, and I heard pretty mixed things about Artemis. I think, from what I heard, Artemis is just Mark Watney but female? Or something like that. I don't know. It's been a few years since it's come out now, so I'm kind of distanced myself from people's opinions of it, so I'm kind of curious to go in and kind of get with some low expectations, and hopefully I'll like it. Next up, we have a book that I am so excited to read. I had never heard of, but I picked it up because I thought the cover was intriguing. And I read the synopsis, and I got halfway through the synopsis and the word elite boarding school popped up, and I was like, oh, we're getting it. But that is Smoke by Dan Vyleta. I believe he's a Canadian author, but it's basically set in this world in which smoke is something that, like, if you commit crimes or do something unsavory, your body will start smoking. And of course the ruling class doesn't smoke and the lower classes do smoke. And then there is an elite boarding school where the sons of the wealthy are groomed to take power as their birthright. All of this sounds intriguing. I had never heard of this book. The author was a finalist for another book for the Giller Prize, which is a big Canadian fictional prize. I can't wait to read this. I hope it's good. I've never heard of it, but it sounds so cool. Next up is a book I am shocked I haven't read yet, and like, shame on me, but that is I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deavor. It's about Ben, who comes out as non-binary and then gets kicked out of their house, and kind of what happens after that. I am in love with this cover. I think it's absolutely stunning, and I've been meaning to read it for ages, and I finally have it in my hands. I also have the audiobook, so I could be getting to it very soon. Next up, I have books 2 and 3 in a series, the Gregor the Overlander series, I think it's called. I actually don't know what it's called. Oh, sorry, it's called the Underland Chronicles. But that is Gregor and the Prophecy of Bane and Gregor and the Curse of the Warmbloods. I read Gregor the Overlander, was it last year? Was it earlier this year? Anyways, I've read it. This is by the author of The Hunger Games, and it's a middle grade series that's really, really fun about a boy and his sister who gets trapped in this weird underground bug place. Yeah, it's weird, but it's great. Totally recommend. At least from the first book, I had a really good time reading it. And last but certainly not least, we have Les Mis by Victor Hugo. I read Les Mis. Now this might be kind of a sacrilege opinion, and I'm sorry for that, but I listened to the audiobook of this. It's a 67-hour audiobook, but I did it. And there were parts of it I really, really did enjoy. Like when we were with the characters and plot things were happening, I was having a good time. But then I would go off on these just pages and pages of tangents about like convents and religion and the use of slang words and the sewers of Paris and just like so much stuff. I don't care. I don't care. It just got really dry in those sections for me. So like if I were to do this again, I'd be like, just listen to the abridged version. It's like 5 hours long. Anyways, I'm sorry, that's probably not very good. But I did overall enjoy it. I enjoyed the parts when we were with the characters, and it did come together in just such a, like, obviously sad way, but it's also just a great story. And I've never seen the musical, I've never seen the movie, so I'm keen to do that now, because apparently that's just the book, what the book is, but without those boring parts. So, but yeah, this is the final book in this book haul. We did it. I think that was 48 books. Needless to say, I'm not allowed to buy new books until at least September. But if I go to a thrift store and they have a book I want, I will still buy it. But until September, I'm not allowed to buy new books because this is slightly ridiculous if we're being frankly honest. Yeah, I hope you like this book haul. I don't think I've ever filmed a book haul before, so that was fun. I probably repeated myself a lot, and I apologize for that. But I hope you liked this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe for more. Happy reading, and thanks for being awesome. Bye!